So welcome, my friends. Today, I'm doing something a little bit differently. I'm not just doing the update. I also have a visitor, a guest who has been with me before. His name is Orest Zub. And if you go back about a month, you'll see his video where we talk about his videos. He has gone all over the country, in fact, all over the world, doing some amazing videographic work. But he has shifted gears since the war began. And he's really taken us inside what the war looks like in a number of different cities. Like you've got to see some of his work. The link to his channel is below. I was just on his channel as we had a conversation about is what's going on right now an extension of the Cold War? So you can go back and you can see our other conversation as well. But Orest, welcome to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here because I have a really interesting question that I want to unpack with you.
Hello, Darren. Nice to see you again, and thanks for having me. Yeah.
So we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary. We're just a little bit away from February 24th, and it's not very far off. And I want you to place yourself where you were this time last year. Were you blissfully unaware of what was about to happen, or were you like looking at what was going on in Belarus and nervous, or like how did you process this?
Okay, so if we're talking about the same time next year, it means like a week or two before the actual invasion
before
starts,
the invasion.
Right? I was happily traveling around the world, so I went with my wife to Budapest. There I participated in a tennis tournament and was meeting my friends and having a wine with them. And from there, I flew to Azerbaijan to visit the Nagorno-Karabakh area, which is a war-torn region, completely devastated by a 30-year conflict between the Armenia and Azerbaijan, And there I was part of the group of international journalists and geopolitical bloggers. We were examining the areas which were like liberated by Azerbaijan after the control of Armenian armed forces for a few decades. So I witnessed freshly reconquered area, how devastated they are. I've seen the destructive result of war, formerly like cities with 100,000 population, but completely in ruins. Wow. And I thought to myself, like, oh gosh, like, thanks God it's not happening to Ukraine. Little did I know which destruction my country will experience shortly after that. At the same time, the conflict was growing. The Russian forces were amassing around the borders of Ukraine. Already back then, there were big tensions in Ukraine and in its vicinity. So, for example, when I was flying from Budapest to Baku, and this was like 10 days before the invasion, when everybody was screaming out loud that it's about to start, I already noticed extra attention to my passport before boarding. They were checking something more carefully, even though I was flying to Azerbaijan, which is like visa-free country for Ukrainians and so on. So there was like something was not really correct, even though it's not related to, anyway, like there was like extra caution this.
But you could kind of feel something was going down.
It was already the time when many Ukrainians were fleeing in fear, also in Azerbaijan, I've seen how people are really worried about the situation, and knowing that I'm Ukrainian, they were telling like Azerbaijan is with you, we don't like Russians the same, they help Armenians, this kind of stuff. So it was like feeling support, and I seen that they're like really involved into the topic. And I boarded the plane from Baku to Kiev on 19th of February, which is like 4 days before the invasion. Even though everybody in our group were persuading me not to board the plane and not to come back to Ukraine, those who were supposed to go on the same plane took a detour through Istanbul, not going through Ukraine. However, for me, it was a no-brainer to come back or not, even though many people were fleeing, because I realized that I have to participate. I have to be with my people, with my country. Doesn't matter what will happen. If you ask me, like, did I realize that there will be the invasion and war? I would tell 100% sure, like 100%. I was sure that there will be military escalation, because you don't have to be, you don't have to be smart. You just look at the map, you see how the things develop, and definitely, like, I mean, I knew that there will be something. What I didn't know how it will be, and that this will be with this massive invasion from 3 sides across the border, with rockets flying for 1,000 kilometers very precisely to hit particular objects. Like, this is like really scary to realize this. To tell the truth, I thought it will be like, another push in Donbass. Like, that's what I thought it will be.
I gotcha.
Yeah, but I couldn't imagine, let's say, attack on Kyiv from Belarus. Like, this I didn't realize. So I was sure there will be escalation. I wanted to come back to Ukraine to participate in the resistance, and then it's history. And then we've seen what happened. Yeah.
So at what point were you, like, pretty sure, okay, Russia's about to do something? Like, you didn't imagine the full scale, but you thought it was about to happen. At what point? Was it a couple weeks out, or was it?
We have to remember that Russia actually did something in 2014 by invading Donbass in the east and by annexing Crimea. So many people tell, like, yeah, nothing will happen, they cannot do it. But, you don't even have to turn on your imagination to see that they already did it.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but okay.
So I was sure, like, even so, let's say, like 2 years ago, I understood that there will be a next step in the frozen conflict that we inherited from 2014.
Gotcha.
And I understood there has to be some kind of resolution, because it was like a floating mode. You have to do something, and such floating mode is usually resolved with the armed conflict, unfortunately. Yep. So I was like, all the time, I was like, since last 3 years, all the time I was ready to believe that there will be some escalation. Yeah, so it was not a surprise for me, I would say.
So you go to sleep on February 23rd, waking up on February 24th, and world has changed. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I believe 2 days before the actual invasion, Putin announced that they incorporate Donbass into Russia, right? So it was like this step, and then in 2 days they actually made the invasion. So I very clearly remember February 23rd. I was sitting with my good friend having coffee in a Turkish restaurant in the downtown of Lviv. Actually, I just had coffee with the same guy in the same restaurant before showing up to speak to you. And we were talking mostly about our business ventures. My friend succeeded in NFT project. I was developing my online platform for Ukrainian entrepreneurs. Life was doing good. We were building our plans. And also, I mean, we touched a little bit, like philosophically, the geopolitics, like what will happen in Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. But this conversation was not different to similar conversation, let's say, 1 month prior to that.
Sure.
Among Ukrainians, there were even different memes, like, the Mr. Bean, like the 4 pictures, and Mr. Bean is sitting in the field of flowers, watching something. Like he's standing. On the next picture, he is like sitting. On the third picture, he's lying. And on the fourth picture, he's already sleeping. And the meme was like, are you going to attack or not? Like, we are waiting when it will come. But then, like, obviously, the evening was regular. And then at 5 a.m., the same friend is calling to me and tell, like, Orest, it has started. So then I just like wake up. he called me like, I scroll through the news and I see that like there is like massive attack happening all around the country. I didn't listen anything. I was like, yeah, like news, attacks, whatsoever. I went to brush my teeth very slowly. You know, I poured myself a tea, like at 5:30. I watched through my kitchen outside. I live in the center, so it's like banks and restaurants around and so on. And I see like two people next to the ATM. So I thought to myself, well, maybe it's a good idea to go and get some cash because I'm not sure what will happen. So I put my coat, I take my shoes out, I walk down, and there is already a huge line of people to this ATM.
Wow.
And then I was like, wow, okay, like I'm not going to stand here, it's winter and so on. I came back, woke up my wife, it's already like 6:30 in the morning. We start reading news that there's like this rockets hitting, like nothing happened near Lviv, but the nearest attack by rocket launch was in Ivano-Frankivsk airport, which is like 1 hour drive from our city. It's also in Western Ukraine, and it is over than 1,000 kilometers from the Russian border. Like we are in the West. And that was like really frightening when we realized that they can shoot a rocket from Russia and target like the airport near your home. So then like things like escalated, Russia invaded by land, and like we started to receive, like people start to call each other, how you're doing and so on. Sure. And many of my friends, people I know, they started to call to Western cities, like, do you have a place to stay and so on, because they started to rush. You know, people from Kyiv, Kharkiv, like the eastern provinces, they just dropped everything in the car and started driving. So the next few days was mostly like answering phones, coordinating. We even pour some water in our bathtub in case there will be water shortage. Obviously, all the supermarkets were full of people. People were buying the stuff. And then in a day or two, in Lviv, I experienced like so many people, you know, because this was the time when these like people who are fleeing from the east actually reached the western territories of Ukraine. So I never seen my city so full of traffic and people as it used to be. And obviously they like the entire atmosphere was very, very like high on nerves and panic and so on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you start to see a human wave coming through. By the way, we do that with the bathroom with hurricanes when they come through. And I live in the southeast of the United States, and I'm very familiar with the flooding of or filling up the bathtub just in case we don't run out of water. Okay, so tell me like how you process what was going next. Like you start seeing this wave, and it's looking bad for Kyiv before very long, and you know what people are thinking, and Zelensky staying, and you know his statements about like I haven't gone anywhere, those kind of things. Like how did that resonate with people? How did that sit? What were you thinking there?
So I think like it's naturally for every human being to react on such situations on the instant level. So basically, first what you do, you turn on the survival mode. You try to take care of basic finances, of food supplies, that your car has petrol inside. People from bigger urban areas went to villages around. As well. Many people tried to flee the country, crossing through the borders. So basically, the entire Western Ukraine was completely in traffic. If you look on Google, most highways and even the side roads on a pretty large area, let's say the area of you are in South Carolina, yes, as I remember staying. Yep. So imagine entire South Carolina is green on Google Maps. It is red on Google Maps. So that is like something what was here. I think like your brain is in such a shock that everything just goes like 1 week goes into one single masked memory. it's hard to keep up with all the news because the pressure and the news flow is so high. You see like explosion here, this city, like in 2 days, Zelensky stayed in Kiev, Ukraine applied to European Union this membership. Many countries announced support of Ukraine. Hundreds of people died. Kiev is besieged. Explosions in many cities. In this, it's like it's like really hard to process everything.
Because you didn't think that this could even happen like that. You were thinking small scale Donbass. Okay, that's what they were doing, but you didn't think this could happen.
Yeah. So it's just crazy. But then at one moment, like very quickly, Ukrainian nation like remobilized. I mean, remobilized in the way that you never receive so many messages. Like the speed of life accelerated 10x, starting like from the first morning. You do so many contacts. You forward one contact to another. Like suddenly your friend, you from Poland, start shipping like helmets to Ukraine. You put him in touch with your friend who went to Kiev to hold positions, near Irpin. People start collecting money for different initiatives. Somebody like dump cars to the east. All of your like 100 friends from different countries contact you and tell Orest, how are you? What do you need? How can I help? It's just I remember I started English language channel from day one, actually. So invite everybody. And actually, you can even see my first video, which was shot on February 24th.
That's right.
It was very quiet day in Lviv with lines to bank, to ATM, to supermarket, and so on. And I was on the street trying to understand what's happening. And what was I talking about? So this one, and because of this, because I actively start to participate in spreading information, I knew that I will be doing exactly that even before the invasion. So for me, it was a very quick decision. I was contacted by tens of journalists from all other countries, and for the first 3 weeks, I believe 4 to 5 hours a day I was spending for this type of interviews, conversations, telling what's happening in Ukraine. So
you had already built all these connections because of your travel vlogging and all that. Yeah. So you already had that platform and that network. So that was fortuitous.
So this was happening, and why I touched this topic, because I remember on one of the interviews, somebody asked me like, "How do you feel, and what's about it?" And I answered to him that it's tragic and it's scary, but it has like a beauty of life on the other side in terms how the spirit went up, how the spirit of the entire nation and the entire world was unified behind Ukraine.
Yep.
And that is something which is impossible to explain.
No, it's not impossible to explain. I felt it from America. I felt that unity and that kinship.
Yeah.
And that like I started taking up my pen at that point. I started writing about Zelensky. Like people need to know who Zelensky is and what is going on there and that kind of thing. So I get it. You said everything sped up. Tell me about how priorities shifted, because I would imagine some things become much more important and other things become like things that you would have otherwise been really maybe uptight about. We're like, that's not really that important.
Oh, absolutely. Like, for example, I have put all my prior work on hold. In general, my profession is like I'm a traveler myself, as you mentioned. I visited over 100 countries around the world. And I am kind of like a recognized lifestyle blogger in Ukraine who usually speaks about travel, self-help topics, online business, and this kind of stuff. And my profession is online consulting. So basically, I was helping Ukrainian entrepreneurs to set up their online business in a proper, like structured way using different online tools. So as soon as the war started, I opened full free access to all of my audience so they can use it for their own needs, because suddenly like a third of my clients went out of business. The other third had to move and had to flee. And then another third somehow were keeping up. So I just like let it flow and provide access to as many people as possible for this platform to be useful. And I just lost interest in marketing, business processes, and so on once the stakes of survival are so high. And even now, like already 1 year past that, after I've been so deeply involved into Ukrainian matter, into reporting, into journalism, it doesn't make much of interest for me to come back to previous life, because once now you're dealing with historical matters, with life and death, with really important topics which will shape our future. Like I don't see sense, coming back to deal with numbers and some marketing tricks and so on.
Yeah, I totally relate. I was doing a podcast. It wasn't like uber successful, but a podcast about leadership. I'm a professor that focuses on leadership, and I was doing that. And then when the Ukraine war broke, I just kept talking about this, and I wasn't interested in anything else, just this, because this is important. And it's like in Technicolor, you can see it. It's just important. Dennis Davdov.
I want to tell here one more, just a second. So one part of my work, where is this? I want to find. Oh, sorry for this. It will keep live. So this is my book about time management, which I wrote in Ukrainian language, and it's like widely accepted. It went well over 10,000 hard copies all around Ukraine and became like pretty successful. But this was like a lion's share of my business, like time management, self-help topic. But these things that I wrote here during peaceful time, like now during war, are like so insignificant.
Yeah.
It's like, everybody became like a specialist in time management during war. Like you do so many things. You don't need extra motivation to be more productive, for example.
Yeah.
You don't need to create artificial conditions to get out of your comfort zone to make things done. You're
right.
Already so much in the uncomfort zone. So these kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. But the point I was about to make was that it seemed like most of the Ukraine YouTubers that I'm aware of were doing something else on YouTube and then just shifted gears real quick when the war came. And I just became fascinated by this. Dennis Davdov had like a motorcycle blog, and like different people had and that was just that. But now we're focused on, and we focus on different slices of what's going on. I focus on leadership issues. Somebody else focuses on battle maps. The visual stuff that you present is absolutely stunning. And again, tell my audience, if you're not familiar with Orest, please go to his channel and watch. Which cities? What was the city that had the bombed out, cratered buildings that you were just like walking inside like a month ago, just before we talked? What city was that?
I personally traveled all around the front line, starting from Nikopol, which is just across the river from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and then all around the border along Russia. But the video you're talking about is probably Kharkiv, like the city in the east, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. Unfortunately, being located only 30 kilometers from the Russian border. Right. So this is a huge city with 3 metro lines, with almost 2 million people living there before the war, now being heavily damaged, like physically. I'm talking about like the big buildings in the city center, in the downtown, with like craters inside of them because of the missiles. Yeah.
So I reached out to you after seeing that video and just seeing like what a missile strike looks like at a building, like just as you're walking around with the camera, seeing the enormity of like what that looked like. I'm like, man, people have to see this. So that's how we first got talking some time ago, and it's really impressive. And so those niches actually help everybody stay involved and focused and aware and keeping support focused on this, because the news cycle just crowded it out. Like other things like Johnny Depp's divorce trial, who cares? People are literally dying here. This is important. So, okay, let me come back to where we were. So about a month in, how has your mind shifted? You've talked about first couple of days. A month or two in, has something changed in you, or now you're, because I know you've been doing a lot of charitable work and things along those lines. Tell me how you progressed in your thinking as time went on.
Okay, so the first month for me was like, okay, first week was about the basic survival stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then the first month, let's say like during March, I was mostly doing interviews, reporting, informing people what's happening in Ukraine, but still being in Lviv. I must tell the truth. This was the moment when everybody was pretty scared in Ukraine, because we never experienced something like this, like a full-scale land invasion. And it was also the time when the world was actually counting days for Ukraine to fall.
That's right.
But as you remember, we withstood this, even though like Kiev was besieged. Major cities in the east were like under circle by Russian forces, but the fact that Russians retreated from the north of Ukraine, they couldn't capture any major city in the north, and they eventually had to come back across the border, was a big motivational boost. Yep. It showed that Ukrainians can fight. It showed that we receive support from the West, and as soon as Russian forces retreated from the surroundings of Kyiv, I went there. So I visited Bucha, Irpin during within days of the Russian retreat. So I remember driving into Irpin and still feeling the heat from the destroyed buildings because they were burning. And the highway, when I was driving to Kyiv, which I'm usually taking by car, and this part of highway was under Russian occupation. So they were shooting people who were driving, who were escaping the city, and so on. It was very scary and very weird when you maybe starting from, let's say, 50 miles, 80, 70 kilometers outside of Kyiv. You start driving the highway and you can see that the part of the structure of asphalt is being destroyed. Mm-hmm. And you see burnt tanks on both sides, or if there is a highway and there are these highway walls, and at a particular section this wall is destroyed because there were probably Ukrainian tanks and Russian tanks, and they are shooting between each other. So this part of the wall is destroyed, and some burnt villages along the way. That was very creepy. Also, it wasn't easy to get into Kyiv because most of the bridges around Kyiv were also destroyed by Ukrainians in order to prevent Russians to advance. So you always there was always huge traffic around the city. People who wanted to come back to their towns to see how their relatives are, you had to go down through some creeks or surrounding villages. That was tough. Mm-hmm. And it was very militarized. So basically checkpoints everywhere. And I never seen Kyiv itself that empty. A huge metropolis, 4 million people, without a single light when you drive at night, or every crossroad you have these anti-tank hedgehogs, we call them, these crosses, and with checkpoints everywhere. It was hard to move around the city, zero public transportation. It's a very dynamic city, but during the April, for example, the latest option time when you can go and eat out was 6 p.m. and only selective restaurants who were brave enough to operate under these.
And you've been in martial law since the very beginning, right? I mean,
yeah. Now martial law is fine. The city is bustling and so on. But this was after this first shock when many people left, and when they were not sure should we come back or not. That was tough. I also witnessed these mass graves in Bucha, for example. Everybody remember when Ukrainians took control of Bucha again? This a terrifying truth start to appear that there were executions and so on. So basically, I was witnessing myself extracting over 20 bodies from the mass grave, and that was a shocking and impactful experience. However, this April was the time when of new awakening, for example. No, it was when Ukrainians see that we can fight, we can win on the battlefield, and let's push, and then the fight actually started to lean towards our side a little bit.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I don't think anybody thought in the early days that Ukraine had any chance. U.S. didn't. They were offering Zelensky a ride for a reason, right? And then to stay and fight was just to double down on that. And he sent this message. I read an interview in The Economist magazine where he was talking about, people were wondering, what do you do? I have to send that message, and if I send that message, I have to do it myself, and I have to stay and show them that this is what Ukrainians do. And you guys, there's something. We talked about this in the other video on your channel, but there's something in the Ukrainian psyche that's very different, very independence oriented, and you were willing to stand up, and good on you all. That was pretty amazing. Okay, I want to move forward now. So now 6 months now the Russians have had success after success. They've taken Mariupol, they've Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. It's looking bad. At that point, where are you feeling? You still had that victory of pushing them out in the north. The Kharkiv offensive has not yet taken place, or the counteroffensive. How are you feeling at this point?
Okay, so if we remember, because mostly people will remember some major points, yes, during the war. There are many bloggers who are doing a great job examining battlefield on a daily. However, the big picture will show some major shift, yes. If we look back during this year and look at the battlefield, there are a few crucial moments what we can see. First of all, this is the initial invasion, February 24th. Second is retreat from the north, which is early April. Russians understood that they cannot get Kyiv, and they're scenario number one with quick victory is not going to happen. So they moved the forces to the east and started steadily eat land kilometer by kilometer in the east. We remember the heroic defense of Mariupol, which is modern 300 Spartans of Azov soldiers, right?
Yep.
This finished in May. In May, the entire world was watching how it's Python is squeezing the territory, and eventually it was locked. The next June was Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, crossing the river of Siversky Donets, and moving on the Donbas and Kharkiv direction, right? Kharkiv was under serious shelling during much of the summer. I traveled there and I felt daily huge bombings in the city. Wow. That was also very scary when you stay in the city where 20% population remain, and you anticipate that in the nearest time there will be a bomb landing somewhere in the city. That's really scary. So basically, we were losing land during the early summer. We were losing land very slowly in Donbas, in the east. Russians could not break through Kharkiv, but the front line was very close. It was 20 kilometers from the city. That's why it was very, very dangerous to stay there. And the biggest counteroffensive happened in September, when there was a counteroffensive on Kharkiv direction, right? So we're talking about Izum, Kupiansk, and this area around Kharkiv, which was a huge motivational boost. I remember this happening, that it was announced that Ukrainians are doing offensive in the south on the Kherson direction. So the Russians were prepared in the south, but then within days, almost by miracle, this massive counteroffensive happened in the east, which was a surprise for everybody. And I must say that Ukrainian intelligence probably doing a great job. They tricked everybody there. So they liberated Kharkiv. From first time, it was a big motivational boost for everybody in Ukraine. But same as with Bucha, they discovered the mass grave in Izum. And it was like already clear it's not occasional, it's like systematic. The talks about the genocide started to appear more and more, and we started to see what's actually happening under occupation, because like the villages around Kyiv, Bucha, is lasted only for 1 month. Russians didn't have proper time to install administration, to set up processes of selection and so on. Izum was already like half a year under occupation, and the surrounding villages. And there you could see the difference, like the areas which were under occupation like really suffered greatly in terms of population loss, in terms of persecutions, in terms of limit to like supplies simply to live and so on. So that one happened. And then the next was, as I remember, there was counteroffensive on Liman direction, which is by land side a little bit smaller. But the massive counteroffensive happened in November on Kherson direction, which was another huge motivational boost for people. And this was like already clear for many Ukrainians that we are very serious about winning the war.
Yeah,
winning the war.
So what I wanted to ask you there was, when you're seeing this, like, how did you feel? How did you process this as you're seeing just before the counteroffensive? It seemed pretty gloomy, right? The counteroffensive comes and you're like, whoa. I mean, I was like, whoa. So I would imagine you have to be like, whoa. I would imagine you're feeling more Ukrainian than you've ever felt when that counteroffensive came.
It's euphoria. It's euphoria. Sometimes you even become blind of how difficult it is to do. But if you keep things in secret, probably because of the preparation from tactical standpoint and so on, and then within days you realize that there was a push for like hundreds of kilometers, like it starts you to believe that we are unstoppable. Yeah. And this is probably when you start realizing how the morale in the army, how the morale in the nation actually work, because like none of Ukrainians experienced war. Like we were only playing the strategy games, and when you play the strategy, you have different points like intelligence, mobility, logistics, and there is always morale. There is always morale. But in the video games, like you don't feel the morale. Here you see how it all ties together and how like definitely morale is important, even in a tech advanced 21st century warfare.
Yeah. So the Kerch Bridge is hit, and I'm sure that was a kind of celebratory moment. I was in that camp, and then immediately after, you start to see all these missile strikes targeting civilians. Not even no, we didn't do that. It was like, yeah, we did that. Like, wait a minute, you're using those missiles not to hit your opponent's army who was trying to kill you, but to terrorize civilians. What were you thinking at that point when that kept happening? There's been 10, 12 waves of that now, including today.
So people tell that that another attack is the answer on something. I don't think like this. I don't believe like this, because I mean, okay, so what is the initial attack? Like, is it the answer of like Ukraine declaring pro-NATO, pro-European movement, or what? This is the way how Russians try to deal with war. They create massive attacks on something, and I don't believe is like, if you wouldn't hit the Kerch Bridge, they would not answer this way. Like, I don't believe in this anticipation. It's not the answer of something. This is just like the way how they try to, to win this war, probably. They think that if they will terrorize the civilian population of Ukraine, at some point we will tell, okay, that's enough. Let's settle something.
I think you're onto it. That's exactly how they're processing it, and I don't think that that's working in any way at all.
It's absolutely not working. Like this is the classical move of warfare of 20th century, when you continuously shoot until people actually exhaust. But it doesn't work with us. We just become more resistant, more angry. And I must say that when these massive attacks resumed in October, that usually targeted energy infrastructure, people at, let's say, like the first few waves, people were still like, okay, let's go to the shelter, or I was using my corridor just to stay away further from the windows. It was the time, like what usually you do, you just find a comfortable shelter place, you go through your phone and you watch the news, right? So for every organization which is collecting money to buy armor, this was like the golden time, because Ukrainians were like donating more actively during this waiting time. So that's how it works. Is like at this moment, like you cannot break the Ukrainian spirit. Like this is something like it just like escalates in return in a much bigger force. That's it.
It's really interesting that if Putin is trying to reunite the countries, he's pushed you guys so far apart. There's generational hatred there. There's not, like, you can even see it in the polls that were like maybe 20% plus in the East were pro-Russian. That's down to 2% from a poll that I just saw. And I'm just like, wow. Okay. So
many of my friends, let me add on this. Many of my friends who were native Russian speakers before the full-scale invasion started, voluntarily converted to speak Ukrainian language, not to have any type of association with Russian culture.
And I've seen many iterations of that kind of thing. They won't capitalize in a professor's class. They won't capitalize R in Russia, like in the word Russia anymore. Books being pulled out of libraries because they're in Russian from the Soviet times. People who refuse to speak the language, all those kinds of things. There's just this animosity, and I get it. I'd feel the same way. I was joking that in the American experience, we converted to coffee and we decimated the English language. And any Brit will tell you we don't actually speak English. We speak some muddled version of it or something. But yeah, there is something like that. Okay, move the clock forward. It's a year into the war now, or roughly a year into the war. What's your perspective? How are you processing, feeling, hopeful? Tell me what you're thinking.
Everybody realizes we are living in a new reality now. Like 8 million Ukrainians who used to live within our country 1 year ago now live abroad. Absolutely new industries appeared. Absolutely new logical connections appeared. Half like people changed their role in life, what they were doing before. Like everything is changed. It's like, I mean, for every Ukrainian, the life is divided before and after the invasion. Like this is 100%. We live in a new reality. We live with new values and new priorities, and we already spoke about this in the beginning. We are adjusted to blackouts from time to time. Situation in the West is better than in the East, and you see that, I mean, you can live with that. Unfortunately, we are, accustomed to death. So basically, because of so many people died, like everybody in Ukraine knows somebody who died probably already, or like most people have their like closer or distant relative who died, who is actively serving in the army. But every like 100% population is somehow involved into the war. If not by active combat, then by volunteering, then by adjusting their business towards the war needs. It's like it's impossible to understand that one single soldier requires at least 12 to 15 civilians in a peaceful life to support him by taxes, by working, by contributing to the economy,
Right.
and so on. Yeah. So our country is living in the martial law, basically where the military becomes the priority, where we have curfew at night. So it depends on from city to city, but in Lviv, between midnight and 5 a.m. it's a curfew. At the early stages of the war, it was like from 10 p.m. until 8 a.m. And like the closer you are to the war zone, the longer period of the curfew is. Yeah. In the meantime, people adjusted to war. So if there is a blackout, businesses use the power generators based on fuel or diesel to continue operating. What else? Most of the population define percent of their income which they donate to the army, to the militaries. There is also very active civil society that supports all types of life in Ukraine. If it's not direct support of the military of soldiers, then there are like flotilla of different other humanitarian initiatives. So basically, everything is changed. Everything is changed. We live in a warring country, in a warring state, which becomes the priority. Most of the male population of the country cannot travel abroad. There is conscription happening on a fast pace, mobilization. Many of my friends are active like soldiers at the moment, or they're like somewhere in the training camps around the country. I am like reporting from the ground, from the front line, work with the journalist, provide media assistance myself, and travel to talk about Ukraine on international conferences. My wife is the art curator. She's organizing art events to support the army. Crazy stuff. Families get separated. They live in different countries. Yeah, that's how it is.
And that's what I was going to ask you with last. You were just touching on your wife as an art curator, and you're doing the charitable things. So if people want to give to charity, what do you tell them to do? How do you steer them? They want to support Ukraine in some way, some meaningful way. Like at the end of my videos, I talk about, look, if you want to give to charity, give to a legit charity. And I have Samaritan's Purse, and I have United 24, and I have a number of things like that. So what do you tell them?
I tell them, number one, vote for your local politicians who support Ukraine, because the existence of Ukraine and the successes on the battlefield mainly support of the Western support, mainly depend on the Western support. So this is number one. If you want to donate, like to participate more directly, it's possible to support big organizations, but there is also a way how you can feel more attachment to this. And we already developed a good way for supporting. So there are two ways, military or humanitarian part. Yeah. I would suggest military, because this what really matters. Like, if Ukraine is losing on the battlefield, militarily, all other social initiatives don't really matter. So this is number one. If you would support the military, I invite you to buy Starlinks for the soldiers, radio stations, and cars. Yeah, so these are three options how every civilian can contribute towards Ukrainian army, because the heavy armor is made by the government. Like, if you do the Starlink, is perfect. Like, I already sent a few Starlinks to my friends who serve in the East, and this simply helped them to get connected, to coordinate things, and so on. And also, there are my readers who tell, Orest, give me your address, I will buy a Starlink and ship it to you, where I will ship it later to people on the front line. If you go to my social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you will see my reports where actually I take the particular Starlink and send it to a particular person with pictures, with reports, with everything. So this is the most direct, addressed help what you can do in this sense. So if you want to send a Starlink to Ukraine, please reach out to me. I am going to provide you address. You can buy it by yourself, send it there and track everything. Like absolutely no problem with that. So this is the priority. There are also people who tell, okay, like this is all good, but I don't want to be connected to anything lethal. I don't want to support the violence, don't want to support the soldiers of Ukraine, even though Ukrainian soldiers are protecting the entire Western fleet of countries. That's fine. Then I suggest you to support any type of medical initiative. For example, there is an initiative in Lviv which calls Unbroken, and this is the facility which is made to cure people who are like wounded during the war. Soldiers and civilians included, they do like these how you call artificial hands and so on. So this is how you can like save life, right? It depends, like if you want to donate to the big organizations, that's good, but most probably you will not feel so attached. So help small organization, you can directly speak with people who actually doing the stuff. Like they are your hands in Ukraine. Yeah, so this is a good way to do. And thirdly, most probably there is Ukrainian community in your vicinity where you are, because currently like over 8 million Ukrainians fled the country. Help them. They also need time and some resources to integrate and to wait until the peaceful time in Ukraine arrives. Yeah.
That's an excellent point. With that, I'm going to say thank you so much for coming back and being able to provide that insight. My whole goal is to make sure that people are aware of what's going on and they're seeing things, because the media is just not covering like it did early in the war. And this insight has been very valuable for my viewers. If you're still watching at this point, please go check Orest's YouTube channel. I'll leave the link to that below and watch his videos. Watch Kharkiv and see the missile, like what a missile does to a building. Watch Irpin and Bucha, because that will help you understand this is what it's looked like. This is what was on the ground. So, okay, Orest, I'm not going to take any more of your time. Thank you so much. I hope to talk again.
Thank you, and hope to see you soon then. Bye-bye.